As the impeachment inquiry continues, new details are coming out about the whistleblower who started the whole process. One America's Jack Posobiec sits down with a former CIA officer to learn more.
We're here back on One America News with Brad Johnson, the president of IntelReform.org. Brad, thank you so much for being on with us.
Fantastic to see you again, Jack.
So we wanted to talk about your time at CIA, also in light of the fact that we have this new CIA whistleblower who's come out, who is reportedly Eric Ciaramella, a member of the NSC, but also a CIA analyst. And I really wanted to get your thoughts on all this.
Yeah, it's a very interesting case, how this is unfolding, and it's something that the press generally is not really digging into the way they should. But Mr. Ciaramella actually came out of Yale, which are one of the Ivy League schools are the traditional recruitment grounds for the agency, at least in the past. That has evolved somewhat recently, but he came out of that background and also was one of the street protest guys. So he was dedicated left-wing street protesting guy that was actually discovered in supporting protesting for a Muslim Brotherhood professor at the university.
Right.
And that's how he came to the surface. From there, he was picked up and recruited back into the CIA, where he eventually ended up at NSC. Along the way in his career, he'd had a little bit of experience with Ukraine, nothing in depth, but some experience there. And so from that, based on that, while at NSC, he became their go-to guy for Ukraine. That was how he came onto the scene and got involved in this process.
All right, now this is a very young analyst, by the way, to be placed on the NSC. Is that something that would go through the director?
Yeah, age, being young involved is actually fairly common. You have a little bit of everything going into NSC, but most assuredly, this is something that when he was picked up and brought into the CIA and put in on the fast track, that he was handpicked by former director John Brennan. Now, we've all talked about John Brennan before. He had a friendly attitude to Muslim Brotherhood during that period under the previous Obama administration. And so this is a young man that would have fit that career track and type of personality that they were looking for. So absolutely, he was handpicked by John Brennan to go from the CIA over to the White House. NSC, National Security Council, is a White House job. So to have made that transition, it would not and cannot have been done without at least the knowledge and acquiescence of the then director of the CIA, John Brennan. Which is interesting now coming to today. John Brennan has been one of the most vocal critics of the President of the United States. And to have his name once again involved with this person who's now the supposed whistleblower. Now, he's not actually a whistleblower. He's just somebody reporting on the President of the United States that he apparently doesn't like. He does not fit the whistleblower criteria, which those are very clear outlines of within the law and regulations as to who is actually a whistleblower, and that is to report on malfeasance or corruption within the intelligence community, not on a separate branch of government like the President of the United States. So it's an inaccurate description to call him a whistleblower just to begin with.
During his time at the NSC, he started during the Obama administration. He was working very closely with Joe Biden, who had been also made the point man for the administration on Ukraine. It's been very public about this. We can see in the White House visitor logs that he was actually participant in the meeting where Joe Biden originally started telling the Ukrainian delegation to fire the prosecutor that was looking into Burisma. He also accompanied Biden on many of these trips. Now, the fact that he's so closely intertwined with Biden and was handpicked by John Brennan, does that lead you to believe that him wanting to stop this investigation is actually because he's worried about what they might uncover?
I think you've hit on the real center of the question that everyone needs to be asking and has not been discussed almost at all publicly. And that is, you've got Hunter Biden, who has zero experience in the energy world, so why would he be picked, and with a background that is normally considered unsuitable? He'd had a drug problem, emotional issues, and was fairly unstable as an individual, and yet was picked to be put on salary by an energy company to the tune of $83,000 per month. Now that's a pretty hefty salary for somebody who has zero experience and no visible utility. So the only thing that...
Which, by the way, apparently this Ciaramella had no issue with.
Correct.
Didn't see any national security issues there.
Precisely. Ciaramella was involved in all of these sorts of things directly, which I think is part of the issue here. So Hunter Biden is paid this enormous salary for doing nothing whatsoever, except he had a father who was vice president of the United States, and that's Joe Biden. Now, maybe there's some sort of innocent explanation for this, but we've not heard it. Nobody knows what it is. But certainly what's implied out of this is that the energy company paid off Joe Biden by paying his son in order to get the prosecutor fired and off their case. Now, there's just no other way to spin that. Those are a lot of questions that have to be answered. It clearly looks like straight up corruption. Now, it may not be, but it looks that way.
If an investigation were to begin into this, would they see Ciaramella as one of Biden's key advisors on Ukraine, carrying his statements forward to the Ukrainians?
Yes, I think Mr. Ciaramella would have to be one of the key witnesses in the case. He would have to be subpoenaed and brought in and questioned on this, because it looks like he was actually one of the players, one of the individuals who set this whole thing up and was actually part of that corruption. And yet now he's being taken at face value as some sort of whistleblower on President Trump. I mean, it's beyond ridiculous. This needs to have an independent prosecutor, perhaps a special prosecutor, take a look at this case to find out if Joe Biden was involved in corruption, and then if this Eric Ciaramella was involved in this himself personally. That would answer all of the questions that we need to know, and it would satisfy what the Democrats apparently are claiming, that this needs to be looked at fairly and independently. So that would answer those questions, and I think they need to be a lot more careful of what they've been asking for, because if that comes through, I think Joe Biden's finished. He would have serious problems. What would be the explanation for this what appears to be corruption?
It's kind of interesting that right after all of this information came out about Ciaramella, they immediately stopped saying that we don't need to hear from the whistleblower in the hearings.
Yeah, very interesting. And of course, that hit right on the heels of the fact coming out that Adam Schiff and his committee had coordinated previously with this same individual, which is, again, deeply suspicious. It looks like the whole thing was manufactured. In fact, not so much to target President Trump, although that is something they're also doing, but instead to cover their own tracks and their own involvement in their own corruption. That's what appears to be on the front burner in this case that needs to be looked at.
Brad Johnson, so insightful. Where can people go to find more of your work?
Intelreform.org.
Thank you so much.
All right, thank you.
Want to see more videos like this? Click on the link below and subscribe to One America News on YouTube, and call your cable provider and kindly demand that One America News is added to your lineup. Call and subscribe today.